Hello, everybody. Dr. Dan Miller, Historical Solutions, LLC. You're on the 250 River with Dr. Dan, episode 33. So we are 250 years ago from the week ending, I don't know what, June 26th or something like that. And I got to tell you, today we are in fact making a little history of our own. I think it's probably more true than I may realize, but I can tell you today we are making history. I'll tell you what that will be as we go through our top 5 from 250 years ago, ending June 26, 1775. Hope you're having a good week. We want to thank our sponsor for episode 33, and I want to get this right. I want to thank John Robinson and the Royal Governor of Maryland, Robert Eden, for their sponsorship of episode 33. That's 99% fact, 1% fiction. They'd like for someone, they're willing to pay, though they don't say how much, but they would like for someone who is so inclined to go out and collect 100 to 200 pounds of rattlesnake root. Rattlesnake root. 100 to 200 pounds of the thing. And if you're so inclined, please bring it to the home, the royal home, the gubernatorial home of Mr. Eden, and drop it off there. They'll pay you for it. They don't say as to why, so I did a little bit of digging on their behalf, or your behalf, if you're so inclined to go out and become a rattlesnake root purveyor. Turns out that John Robinson, who is in the royal side of the colonial government of Maryland, has been deathly ill, and rattlesnake root has quite a few different medicinal purposes that have been handed on to colonists from the experiences of Native Americans. They use it extensively. The colonists have decided that it's a good idea. They've seen the proof that it works. And so now that takes us to our sponsor, who's looking for 100 to 200 pounds of it for Mr. Robinson's personal use, I suspect. Thank you to the governor. Thank you to the ill and hope to be recovered Mr. Robinson as our sponsors for this week's 33rd episode of On the 250 River with Dr. Dan. All right, we're back engaging the graphics department again, so they're doing their good work. We're doing number 5 right now in our top 5, and this slot goes to Valentine Crawford. Now remember, you can see the full written entry of this over at my website, historicalsolutions.com, under Americanism Redux. There's some pretty cool stuff there that we're not going to be able to get to today, but we've got Valentine Crawford coming in at number 5, and he's looking at a field of corn. He's out at the confluence, the joining of the Ohio River and the Great Kanawha River in what is now, I believe, West Virginia, and what is now the community of Huntington, West Virginia. Neither of those two names existed at that point in time when Valentine Crawford is out there as a Virginian, having gone west to seize land, buy land, develop and settle, and hopefully maybe sell land. He's standing at on a field of corn, looking out at that field, and he likes what he sees. A lot of other stuff going on around him that's not very good, but he likes what he sees in this field of corn. Green, healthy, tall to the extent that it should be in late June. And he knows that if certain things happen or don't happen, rain and wind and pests, along with a variety of other things, if certain things happen, then in about 10 weeks or so, that stand of corn that he's looking at will have grown further and have gotten to the point of harvesting, and that's a good thing. I like this story, and I put it in at number 5 because I wonder. It's future framing. As I said, he sees the corn, knows 10 weeks or so in the future, if things go as they typically often do, there'll be a good little chunk of harvested corn coming out of that acreage. That's his future, or that's part of his future. He's framed the future that way. I wonder what you look at, what you just assume is part of your future framing as you stand here now in late June of 2025. What's your future framing? Some good, some bad, some probably in between. That's number 5. So thank you to Valentine Crawford and his field of corn at the confluence of the Ohio and Great Kanawha Rivers. We're going to go on to number 4. And her name is Road, R-O-A-D. She's 28 years old. She is an escaped African-American woman. She's been in slavery. She's been enslaved, held against her will, for 28 years. We can, I think, justifiably assume. She's on the coast of North Carolina, or at least she used to be, because she's on the run. Road is on the run. She's been free for about 2 months, and some people want her back because they think that she is their property, and they're putting up money for that to be true again. And so, Road is beautiful. She's a very striking young woman. She loves bright, colorful clothing. She loves her hairstyle. She, as part of her beauty, she sweeps it up in a kind of a swirl or a bun. Her thick, rich hair, and she's got a fake document that attests to her being a free woman and should be left alone as a result of that. So Road is our number 4, and here's why I want you to think about this. In addition to just the inherent, intrinsic human drama of it, if it's 10 years back, and she's 18 and not 28, and the year is 1765 and not 1775. How much different of an environment is that one-person event fitting into? Now in 1775, we've got about a 2 or 3 year old anti-slavery movement that's kind of sprouted a little bit, grown a little bit. Not as much as the corn in the field of Valentine Crawford. It's not that tall, it's not that mature yet, and it certainly doesn't have such a clear future in front of it. But it's planted and sprouted in a few northern communities. That really wasn't true 10 years ago. On top of that, we've got a colonial imperial crisis that has exploded beyond protests into organized violence and bloodshed. That has as part of its cause freedom, liberty, for some independence, for others not, as a goal. But certainly freedom and liberty and more assertion of rights, individual rights. That anti-slavery root and plant is kind of coming up alongside of that a little bit in 1775. Now where it will go, we'll find out. And we've got both sides now, pro-empire, anti-empire, both sides potentially thinking through enslavement and what can they do to benefit their cause, their side, their position as it relates to enslavement. The governor just one state north, or one colony soon to be state north, Dunmore, he'll actually think about offering freedom to people like Road in exchange for their allegiance and for their support as members of the British Empire. So this thing can cut in a lot of different ways. My only point is that this environment did not exist 10 years ago. So Road is in an interesting world right now, seeking her own freedom on her own terms. Number 3 in our top 5, thanks to the graphics department. Number 3 is a guy named Thomas Spence. Tom Spence is in Newcastle, England, and he's a teacher, and he's dirt poor. His family's been dirt poor, and there's more promise in that cornfield of Valentine Crawford's than there is in the prospects of the Spence family in Newcastle, England. And so Thomas Spence, Tom Spence, is starting to write an essay, a little book about the injustice of it all, and how some people have a lot and a lot of people have nothing, and his family's got nothing, and they ought to have land. He doesn't know Valentine Crawford even exists, but that's the kind of thing he would want for himself. Why does he have land and we don't? And we ought to rethink and overhaul and revolutionize land ownership and land possession. Spence will be writing. And I really think that all of society ought to be changed fundamentally into kind of common mutual ownership of land and that kind of thing. This is what Thomas Spence, old Tom Spence, is writing, starting to write 250 years ago toward the end of June. I want you to know I encountered this on the Marxist Internet Archive. So here we are 250 years later, and Spence's ideas and Spence's written works are featured on the Marxist Internet Archive. You never know how time's going to unfold, and how that unfolding of time is going to treat your ideas and your legacy. Number 2 in our top 5. Let me check our time. We're okay. There's a personal meeting. There's an individual meeting, and it's official in New York City. George Washington, he's the new commander of the new Continental Army that the Second Continental Congress has created as the next step, the next measure in this exploding crisis that reached bloody proportions at Bunker Hill, about a week or so ago outside of Boston. So Washington is traveling from Philadelphia, where he was a delegate. They asked him, remember, would you be our general? And he, after a long weekend, said yes. So he's traveling with a small entourage, and they're going through New York City on his way to the outskirts of Boston to see this new organization that he's agreed to be the leader of. One of the things that was so clear and remains clear now is that the Second Continental Congress and everybody involved believe deeply that the civilian government, the civilian power has to have control over the military. Military can't control the civilians have to control the military. That's historical wisdom and historical truth from the perspective of so many people in the Continental Congress and on the pro-colonial side of this dispute. Civilian control of the military. If we don't have that, we might as well not even resist or protest or do anything else at all. So in the meeting in New York City, George Washington, in his new official capacity, is face-to-face with a guy named Peter Van Brugge Livingston, who in his official capacity is the presiding officer of the New York Provincial Assembly. It's a pro-colonial rights assembly, legislature. And in the meeting, Livingston very pointedly says something in an official capacity. He says to Washington, I've heard so much about your virtues, your virtuous outlook, your belief in virtue itself. You are our commander of this new army, and we're lucky to have you. But, and, I want you to remember this, General Washington, that at the end of the day, at the end of the night, and the end of everything in between, the civilian power controls the military. You lead the army, we lead you. That's how it is. George Washington, hearing this, replies officially, and he says, you're exactly right. And in a paraphrase, and I'm close to quoting him here, he says that it's the duty of the soldier to go back home when the war is over and when service is finished. Go back home. You want to know how an idea becomes a principle, becomes a value, becomes part of a nation's DNA. It's meetings just like this. It's not only laws and speeches and statutes and things. It's meetings just like this. It's repeated 100 and 100 and 100 times more. But it's meetings just like this, and I'm really happy to be able to share this with you from 250 years ago right now. So that's number 2. Now, do you remember I said a minute ago that we're going to make history today? Pointing this out to you, this meeting between Livingston and Washington, and this, how does an idea become a value, become a pillar, become a DNA? That's kind of historical making. That's kind of history making, but that's not what I'm referring to now as history making. That's going to be number 1. You see, number 1 is a letter that Thomas Jefferson, and remember, all this is on the site. Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter on June 26 to one of his buddies. And Jefferson is a member of the Virginia delegation to the Second Continental Congress, like Washington used to be. And in the letter, Jefferson says something really remarkable. 2 things remarkable. The first one is that we just heard the report read out loud to us, the delegates. We just heard the report of what happened outside of Boston in this battle, this brawl, this wading of blood on a hill outside of Boston. So that's kind of, do your days here, right? You're looking at about 9 days or so before this official word gets read out loud to them all. Love to have been in the room to have seen the reactions to this. So in the letter to his buddy, where Jefferson describes that, he says something else. He says that, well, now it's pretty clear, paraphrase Dan now, it's pretty clear that negotiation, accommodation, the adjudication of the dispute between the British Empire and us as the British colonies, that's not going to happen because of, and here's the thing, the interposition of arms. The interposition, interposition, the interposition of arms, of effectual arms. It doesn't say till the war is won, or a war is fought and a war is won. He says the effectual interposition of arms. Here's how you and I are going to make history right now. So that just hit my head in a way. Jefferson's a word nut like I am. I'm not as good at it. But he's a word nut, and he chooses everything really carefully, and says it, writes it, and all the rest, with great care and thoughtfulness. And so I went and looked up the word interposition. And you do the dictionary. You can do it. You can check me if you want. It's essentially a dropping in of a intermediary or intermediate force in between 2 things. You interpose it in between 2 things. That's interposition. Okay? But then just this morning, doggone it, as I'm getting ready to talk to you, had this nagging voice in my head. God dang, I've heard that before. So I do some little work here, research on it, and you know what? It turns out that one of his best friends, James Madison, uses that word in writing one of the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions that are pronounced and announced in 1798 in opposition to what was seen as a dangerously overreaching federal government and presidency of John Adams, all around immigration, primarily, Alien and Sedition Acts, and in the resolutions, Madison uses the word interposition. The state, he says, has the right, the power, and the opportunity to interpose itself in between the people and the federal government that has passed and is about to enact a law that violates the interests of the people. Even though that law has been passed lawfully, constitutionally, there is a doctrine of interposition that a state can insert itself, meaning Virginia, Kentucky, and so on, can interposition, it can interpose itself in between the feds on the one hand and the people on the other and block this egregious, obnoxious, and offensive law, whatever it might be. In their case, it's the Alien and Sedition Acts, predominantly immigration. John C. Calhoun will pick up on this thread in the state of South Carolina, and he'll use it to justify opposition to the tariff and specifically, really, opposition to the end of slavery. Interposition. Probably see it if you do a little further digging. George Wallace, a couple of the other folks of the segregationists in the 1950s, I would wager you're going to see imagery, words, meanings that are really close to interposition. And I think we see some of that right now with regard to groups that are opposed to things coming out of POTUS 47's presidential administration and the federal government. Interposition. Jefferson says it first, 250 years ago, right now. Madison says it second. John C. Calhoun says it next. The Southern segregationists of the 1950s say it again. And so here we are. I was really struck by Jefferson's use of the word interposition in the letter to his friend, written June 26th, 1775. So what's the big idea, Dan? I'm running long, and I apologize. What's the big idea? All of these things are happening months and months ahead of the Declaration of Independence. We're almost smack dab 12 months out, right? And here we are talking about civilian control of the government. Here we are talking about, privately, constitutional interpretations that are going to take on a life of their own, for better or for worse, depending on the folks using them, I suppose. Here we are, grappling with union and what it means for that union to present itself as a nation. Here we are 12 months ahead of anybody signing any document that has the word independence in it. I'm Dan Miller, Historical Solutions, LLC. You've been watching episode 33 of On the 250 River with Dr. Dan. Hope you have a good week, and I'll talk to you soon.